is call to order the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee. So, roll call.
Chair Cardinal.
Here.
Vice Chair Hanneman.
Here.
Member Barrett.
Here.
Member Bowden.
Here.
Member Wolf.
Here.
Member Powell.
Here.
Member Smith.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up to any public comment. Seeing none, we will move forward to, right before we're going to go for approval of minutes, I'd like to introduce a new member of the committee, Katie Bowden. Got it right? So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here.
Sure, thank you. My name's Katie, and I've been in Carson City for, I think, about 36 years. I'm a realtor here in town for the last 16 years. Carson City is just a passion of mine, so when I was asked to make an application for the board, then I thought it would be a great thing for me to do and learn and experience. So I hope I can be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Okay, agenda item number 3 for possible action, approval of the minutes from June 3rd, 2019.
I move to approve the minutes of June 3rd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item 4A, presentation and discussion only regarding an update on and to solicit public comment on the 90% design of the South Carson Street Complete Streets project. Say that 3 times really fast.
Good evening, committee. Dan Stuckey, city engineer for the record. Yeah, that is a hard one to say fast 3 times. So we're back here. We were last here, I believe, on May 6th, I want to say, for the 60% update. As you know, RAC has contributed $200,000 to this project. So as part of that, we want to keep you obviously informed on this project. And this will be the final stop in front of you before the project moves on to construction. We'll talk a little bit today about what we've been doing since we last saw you, the schedule as far as moving forward to close out design and get into construction. We'll talk a little bit about that, including upcoming RTC meetings and Board of Supervisors meetings. One of the past feedback that we heard from you guys loud and clear at multiple meetings was possible look at creative ways to educate the public about how to properly use a roundabout. And so we heard you. We have a video that was released probably a month ago, put out on all of our social media outlets as well as on carsonproud.com. I would like to show you guys that video today. We think it's pretty effective. Project schedule update, like I mentioned, we'll talk about kind of what we're going to be doing moving forward. And then you guys are probably sick and tired of me talking about this, but we do think it's important in the public meeting setting to talk about ways that the public can stay in touch with the current news and what's going on with the project. So we do have a slide just to go over those again for you. And with that, we'll get started. So May 6th is when we last saw you, and May 16th, we went to the Board of Supervisors for the 60% update. That was approved, and they directed us to advance the design to 90%, which is where we are. 90% was submitted. The plans were submitted for review by the project team a week and a half ago, so we're in the review process for that and refining the design. June 12th, we went to RTC, and this was a presentation only, and we talked about kind of what the impacts the public can expect as far as traffic-related impacts post-project. And so this is a really good discussion. There was a consultant that did a report and analysis, really detailed analysis for us. That's all on the Carson Proud website, as well as I believe you can access it through RTC. But it talked about impacts that you would see immediately after construction of the project, as well as looking out on a 2040 horizon, so 20 years from now, what the impacts would look like then when we anticipate growth and how everything would function. So again, a lot of information there is on the website. I wasn't going to go into detail today. Carson Proud updates. As I mentioned, we've done a lot there. I don't know, every probably couple of weeks we put out some new material based off of public meetings that we give. And we actually went through, this is a federal project, we're required to give information regarding kind of the public outreach that we've done on this project. And I thought this was important to note that we really have, when you look back to when the corridor study was done for RTC back in 2016-ish to where we are today, this will be, I think today is the 17th public meeting that we've had on this project. So through all that, we've attempted to communicate the project and the evolution of the project to the public, but we've also gathered a lot of really good feedback along the way. So I thought that was an interesting statistic to point out. So what have we been doing between 60 and 90? And I just highlighted a couple items there. There's a lot to it, but this is the high level stuff. Underground utility design. You all know that water and sewer and stormwater improvements are included with this project. That really has taken shape, and we've really finalized or gotten close to finalizing that design as it's progressed. Landscaping, street lighting, and street furniture. So this is where a lot of the RAC funding will go to, is more of these streetscape, landscaping type features. So I did want to point out, a lot of the street lighting fixtures, we do have some decorative street lighting. I put a picture below. This is along the multi-use path. They're calling these oasis areas is what we've kind of the term for it. But it's an area where, you're riding on the multi-use path and you can pull over and sit on a bench or get some shade in a tree area. But wanted to point out, just because, your funding will be used for features like this. Roundabout design refinement. I don't have any slides specifically talking about it today, but I think where we last left off with you, that's pretty much the design moving forward. It is a multi-lane roundabout, and like I said, we will have a video to show you later on in this presentation about that. Really what's going on right now is, between the 60 and 90, we did a lot of value engineering. So these are items where, can we design the project better to help with making the construction process easier and more efficient, but also cost-wise, is there things we can do in the design that can save money? So that's value, what we term value engineering. A lot of that's been taking place. And then constructability modifications, we're looking at, again, ways to construct things, but we're also starting to get more so now than we're really getting into it now, but is how can we better phase the construction to limit impacts on the businesses along the corridor? And so that's always a balancing act, because, we experience it downtown where some businesses just want you to get in and get out as fast as you can. And if that means like shutting down for a week and making it, pretty kind of disrupting traffic, but you're out of there in a week, they're all for it. And then, versus not having as much disruption to the traffic, but having the construction duration over a longer period of time. So we're trying to kind of balance those impacts right now and having those discussions with the project team. So I wanted to mention that. The gateway feature update, there is some money that RAC has allocated to the gateway feature. I discussed last time in May 6th that was not going to be a part of this project. We talked at the time about possibly building a foundation for a future art sculpture monument that we would put in the roundabout. However, as it's really hard to design a roundabout or design a foundation for something that you don't know what it's going to look like at this point. And so what we're going to do is we're got plans for some grants. A couple of them are coming available in November. And I think I told you we're going to use this redevelopment money as a match for a grant to do something bigger at that roundabout location. And then we'll probably have to come back. Well, we will come back after construction, either during construction or after the project's over, and get into that roundabout area, disturb some of the, maybe have to replace a shrub or two, but the cost impacts will be minimal to come back later and do it, rather than design a foundation and all of a sudden realize a year from now that we needed a bigger foundation. So that's kind of the direction we're heading now with the project. So again, based off your feedback, we have a roundabout video that we produced through input from the public, and we put out, again, on Carson Proud. It's on there today. I'll have Lee play it right here, but yeah, it's a good, it mostly talks about not necessarily the details of the design of the roundabout, but really just to the public, how will you use a multi-lane roundabout? So Lee, with that, do you mind playing that video?
Current roundabouts in Carson City are only single-lane roundabouts, whereas the design for the South Carson Street and Stewart Street intersection is a multi-lane roundabout. This roundabout is intended to reduce traffic delays and, most importantly, improve traffic safety. So, how do you use a multi-lane roundabout? Here's how. When entering a roundabout, be sure to pay close attention to the signage. Know which lane to use before entering. You must yield to traffic before entering. Look to your left. If there's traffic clearance, proceed to go through. With multi-lane roundabouts, drivers must yield to both lanes. If you are going to turn left or make a U-turn, stay in the left lane. If you are planning to make a right turn, stay in the right lane. Most importantly, stay in your lane. Always yield to pedestrians on both the entrance and exit approach. If an emergency vehicle is entering a roundabout, exit at your destination and pull over immediately. Never stop or pull over in the roundabout.
So there's the video again on carsonproud.com. So please share if you feel, the public out there that's watching this, please go there, share the video to others. That'd be great to try to get the word out on that. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the schedule moving forward on that design. So we're actively reviewing the 90% design right now. We'll be making changes, refining that, and moving and completing design in September, October time period. We do have the next scheduled meetings for the RTC and Board of Supervisors is up there. So August 14th, we'll be going to RTC for a 90% design update. And then August 15th, going to the Board of Supervisors for the update and hopefully approval to advance it and complete the design. Construction still on schedule. The plan here is towards the end of the year, we would start executing a construction contract and then start mobilizing construction equipment with heavy construction actually digging into the ground and all that happening in early 2020. So the first week in January, I believe, is what we're targeting right now. We anticipate it it's probably closer to the 9-month construction duration than the 12, but we're still working out phasing and trying to balance those impacts with the businesses down there and looking into that in a little more detail. Here's the project communication tools that I talked about, carsonproud.com. I did want to show, I don't think I've shown any screenshots of what the material is, but here's some screenshots of the website. You can see I've circled in red. There's a project FAQs. I would encourage the public, maybe that's just finding out about the project. From those 16 public meetings that I mentioned earlier, tons of reports in there and showing the evolution of the project, plans, videos, all sorts of different stuff. So it's a great resource. FAQs, obviously, I think we have 25 or 30 questions in there that can really help get somebody up to date on the project as well. So I did want to point that out. And then, of course, the roundabout video is up there as well. Text subscription service. I know I've mentioned this is the third time now to you all, but if you text Carson Proud to 31996, it'll sign you up for automatic updates about the project. So as I mentioned, every month or so, a couple weeks, we provide updates. But as construction gets going, those updates are probably going to be a lot more beneficial to people wondering what's going on in the area. So just wanted to remind everybody of that. And again, we're trying to put a lot out to social media. Everything that goes to Carson Proud, there's a link that also goes out to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all sorts of other different social media platforms. Tom Grundy sitting next to me, I didn't introduce earlier on, I apologize for that, but Tom Grundy, he's the guy that knows the project in and out, it's the project manager. So his email is up there as well as his direct line, so please reach out if you have questions on the project. And that is it. So we're getting down to the end, and with that, I'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Well, here comes the speed limit guy again. From the intersection of I-580 and Carson, what is the speed limit going to be all the way up to Clearview?
The speed limit from south, the intersection I-580, 50 to Clearview will essentially remain as what it is today.
All the way?
All the way to Clearview.
Why?
That is just, I mean, people are going to be getting up to, we want people to be able to accelerate to get out to that interchange. And that's the recommendations that we've had from not only our internal staff, but also when I talked about the RTC update, we did have the consultant that we hired looked at speed limits across the corridor and recommended speed limits there as well.
Why is the speed limit 3 blocks east of Solomon on 5th coming west, step down to 35? Is that because the high school is just north of there? Coming west on 5th to Solomon, there's a Chevron station on the southeast corner, and the speed limit goes to 35, about a block and a half back of that, I think.
From 40.
From 45, I believe. Could be 40, I don't know. So, I mean, that's going to be a crossing that people use there. That's the west to east crossing for walkers and bikers. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine you're not going to step it down that last block and a half or so.
Yeah, and I know we've had past discussions on this. We have looked into it. I mean, we do feel like that crossing being at a signalized intersection is the safest type of crossing that you can possibly, I believe, have on a corridor. And again, we've looked at it from, I know you're concerned about it, and I do hear what you're saying because you have.
I'm more than concerned. Yeah. I mean, people text, they're on their phones, they're coming up there 45, 50. If you're doing 45, you might be doing 50. And look away from the crossing. I'm more than concerned.
Yeah, one thing I think we've mentioned in the past, we're looking at signalized timing across the corridor, and a part of that we've done pre-project, but post-project we'll also be looking at it. One thing I did look at based off last time we talked about this is, I believe the term is red. I'm not a signal expert or anything, but I believe it's red clearance time. So, because I think essentially what you might be concerned about is people running a red light or something through, and then somebody's starting to cross, and obviously the collision there. One thing that they can do is, I think, extend the red clearance time, and so essentially it goes red. And before people are allowed to cross the street, you lengthen that period of time, so there's kind of a gap. So it's a less efficient intersection. You're moving traffic through further, but as far as safety, you kind of have a lag there before people are actually getting in and crossing to eliminate, I think, your type of concern. So that's something we can definitely look at and we can bring up when we're starting to look into that signal timing for post-construction on that.
Thank you.
I got a question. The roundabout on 5th, isn't it 40 miles per hour heading north currently on that roundabout with no slowdown?
Is that? Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and there's a lot, I mean, I go through that every day, and there's a lot of pedestrian and bike traffic and stuff through there too, but people just, you have to slow down. You couldn't go through there at 40 miles an hour. So there is that.
Yeah, but this isn't the roundabout I'm talking about. I'm talking about down Clearview.
South, yeah. Yeah, close to your business down there, but yeah.
But you're saying it's going to stay at 45 from 580 to Clearview?
So from I-580 US 50 interchange to the south, between that and Clearview, it'll remain essentially what it is today, which I think it ramps up to, is it 45? Or does it ramp?
Going south.
I think it might go to 50, yeah.
Might-
So you're talking
ramps
about
up to 50.
before you get to the
I'm
roundabout?
talking about people coming north out of Douglas County. If they get through that light, they may get stopped at that light. If they get stopped, they'll speed up because it's 45. I should put this on. If they're stopped at that big intersection, then they'll speed up. If they blow through it anyway because it's green when they get there, they'll just keep going the same speed. And my concern isn't that they go 45 there. My concern is they're going close to 50 and not paying attention and get to a place where people are pedestrians and bicycles crossing.
Accident looking for a place to happen.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any public comment? Okay, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Lee, I was going to ask you on item 4B, where it says the Board of Supervisors already directed park staff to complete the update of the master plan and has allocated the money. I would recommend maybe we just skip that, because if they've already approved it, then I'm not sure why we're bringing it up. Okay, then for, for possible action, 4B, discussion of possible action to make the recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the expenditure of the $200,000 update for Fuji Park Master Plan facilities.
Okay. Good evening, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. I'm glad to see a full commission. Finally, we got the seventh person on board. So actually, you said 200,000. It's a 20,000. This is a $20,000 expenditure for the master plan, just for the record. So I was going to, part of the start of my presentation is a reminder for these expenditures is really a three-step process. Putting it in the budget is just the first step. It's also required, besides putting it in the budget, that the Citizens Committee makes a recommendation. There's the budget, and then there's the expenditure. It's put in the budget, then the Citizens Committee makes a recommendation on the expenditure, then the Redevelopment Authority and Board of Supervisors authorize the expenditure. So I know I was looking at the order of things, and 2 items from now, I'm going to discuss the budget as it was approved by the Board of Supervisors, at which time I would say that one of the things they did modify, there was some cost savings in what was allocated for the Fuji Park, for the fairground sound system. It came in a lot less, and the Board of Supervisors wants a master plan of Fuji Park done before additional expenditures are done, including the signage, including what's planned for next year, a big fairground stands. They want to know that they want to know what types of improvements we want to actually do to that before authorizing more expenditures on that facility. So using that cost savings from the sound system, which they ended up doing under last year's budget, they put in the budget this $20,000 to help the Parks and Rec Department do the master plan for Fuji Park. So again, as part of the process, this is now, the expenditure is not authorized. REC needs to make a recommendation on that, and then we need to take it back to the Redevelopment and Authority and Board for the expenditure. So, and Jennifer Budge is here, the Parks and Rec and Open Space Director, would be happy to answer any questions that you have about this.
So Lee, even though they've already approved this expenditure? No, just the budget. Oh, just the budget.
Yeah, and this wasn't something that came up as just, if you remember, this did not come up at the Citizens Committee. This was something that just came up, a project, a plan that just came up at the Board of Supervisors level.
Yeah, Brad Bankowski has been very concerned that we have the master plan in place before he's willing to vote for anything. I understand.
So I guess my question is, so for an update to the Fuji Park Facilities Master Plan, is there any items to discuss on this? For the expenditure of it? I mean, we approved it in the budget, but what are we going to spend it on, I guess? Would be my question.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. The $20,000 would be to hire a third-party consultant, and they would facilitate the process for us. We'll have public meetings. We'll work with the Culture and Tourism Authority, other primary user groups to really figure out what the best way is to approach any development at that park. We have a good problem that we get really well-attended events, but there's not enough parking, for example, at the facility. If we add more seating, what does that do if we don't have a place to park? How does that impact our neighboring businesses? We don't want to have a negative impact on them. A lot of times we have park and ride situations, and that's really good and creative, but we don't want to create a further problem. In addition, it's looking at the elements within the park and making sure that those are best supporting the events at the facility. We've had a lot of events come to the city interested in having their event at Fuji Park, but it just doesn't quite meet their needs. So we want to try to attract those external events and bring those event organizers in to help, bring in that economic impact to that facility.
Okay, thank you. I have a question not about the consultant, but actually on parking, because I know in the past, before we sold the land behind us, we used that for the fair as well. But I hear that all the time. Does anybody have a good idea or recommendation at this point without, I know that's just part of what the consultant might talk about, but I know we've got a couple of big events coming up. We just had the fair, and it does come into play, because I know the casino next door doesn't really like people parking in their spot during the event. Or Costco, yeah. So I just wondering myself if there's any ideas out there right now to solve that problem.
Well, I do feel like on the very south end of the park, beyond the pond, we have a very informal parking area, and it's not well organized. We could accommodate more parking back there if it was formalized. We have to worry about impacts to the pond, though, because if you add additional asphalt and additional things like that, it really could compromise that urban fishing pond that people love so much. So I do think there's an opportunity there. You can get creative and try to do shared use agreements with surrounding properties and see what that might bring forward. Half of the park is actually located within Douglas County. We could have conversations with Douglas County and see if there's any opportunities for like a cooperative agreement somewhere with them as well. And if you look at the park, how it's developed now, you could reimagine it and have different functions and amenities within that park to either serve parking or be a different function. So I think that's something we'd really need to look at. And that needs to include, a really good, robust conversation with the public and what's important to them there.
Agreed. Thank you.
Jen, I hadn't realized that half of it, Fuji, was in Douglas County. Are you going to be talking with Douglas County about, use, monies, et cetera?
I always joke with their parks director that we're going to be going to them for requests for residential construction tax to use for a neighborhood park component. But I have a good relationship with the Douglas County Parks Director, and I think it'd be important to involve them in the conversation because it's a regional facility. It's not just something that supports Carson City and our users and our public. So they would definitely be part of the conversation and invited to participate.
Jennifer, is the parking the area down to the west of where the dog fenced-in area, is that Douglas County or is that Carson City?
It's the south end of the park that's in Douglas County.
Okay.
So it
So
goes
could
that
that area
whole
be
rectangular
considered for additional
portion.
parking as well down there?
Well, the entire park really could be considered for that, but you don't want just parking. You want to have hopefully a balance, and you hate to pave paradise, as they say, and really look at the balance. But it's a very popular facility. It could have more use. In between events, it's very stagnant. We do have a lot of impromptu, we'll call it special events. People will show up and have, 500 or 600 people and have at the pavilions, and the dog park is heavily used. Another sort of user function that we get on a regular basis is these traveling dog shows. they bring more people than any other special event that we have there. And it's really a market that people don't cater to, and I want to make sure that they're considered moving forward because they're really good renters. They take great care of the facility, and they're constantly increasing and bringing use there. So I think it's sort of an untapped market that a lot of people don't have, or organizations don't have the ability to accommodate. And luckily, we do. Parking, again, for them is also an issue, as well as seating capacity at the fairgrounds.
Anyone else? Thanks. So we heard it's for a consultant. Do I hear, does anybody have any recommendations or want to make a, just lost my train of thought.
Well, I think what you're asking for is a motion. I move to recommend to the Redevelopment Authority approval of the expenditure of $20,000 for the Fuji Park Facilities Master Plan.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Okay, yeah, the mark. Item 4C for possible action, discussion and possible action to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the expenditure of up to $12,000 for purchase and placement of informational signs at Mills Park, located on 851 East Williams, in accordance with the adopted Parks and Recreation Open Space Department Single Master Plan. Lee.
Got it. I got the change that up there. I had the wrong park on the slide, but yeah. So this is another item that we weren't sure if they were. There's another one that was put in the budget. This one came before RAC. This was a recommendation of RAC for funding for the signage. When you authorized other expenditures at a prior meeting, wasn't sure this was ready, but now they're ready. You have the complete signed master plan document was included in your packet. And they were proposing to put signs in conformance with that sign plan in Mills Park. These signs that are shown in the master plan say Fuji Park, because those are the examples, but they would be those types of signs in Mills Parks with information and other directional signage in the park. Again, Jennifer Budge is here if you have any specific questions about their plans.
I know we've talked about this one quite a bit in the past, but does anybody have any questions, comments?
It's needed.
Okay, let's look for a motion. Oh, public comment? Nope. Okay, how about a motion for 4C?
Move to recommend the Redevelopment Authority that the expenditure of $12,000 for the Mills Park signage.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, moving on to 4D for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the allocation of undesignated redevelopment funds for fiscal year 2020 and the estimation of future allocations for the following 4 years to implement redevelopment objectives.
So again, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. I put this on the agenda primarily to update you on the budget that was ultimately adopted by the Board of Supervisors based on your recommendations. We're barely 1 month into this year's budget, so there's not a lot to update on the progress on these projects. Actually, Dan Stuckey stuck around with Public Works in case you do have any questions on any of the particular ones. But generally, the plan is I wanted to show you what was budgeted. I think it was pretty much as recommended by the Citizens Committee, except for that transfer for the master plan, for the Fuji Park master plan item that you just heard. The plan is in November at your regular meeting. That's when you usually start to talk about ideas and budgeting for the following year. This year, it's also a time when I've given the Parks and Rec and Public Works a heads up in particular to have more of an update on the planning stage of when these projects are going to be completed within the calendar year. So again, it's early. They just got the funding, so they are in the process, and Public Works in particular, of coming up with plans for the for the Third Street parking lot rehabilitation, how the money's for the downtown, the sidewalks, undergrounding of power, and lamps will be used, and those types of things. So pretty much unless you have any questions for anybody, there's really no action that I'm requesting for this, but I put it on for possible action in case something came up with the budget and you wanted to make a recommendation to the redevelopment authority to make any changes, but I didn't anticipate that tonight and expect a more detailed update and action and possibly moving things around based on project timelines in November. That's all I have. I'll conclude with that and take questions.
I just had a question, Lee, about, I think there were some line items that were not approved by the Board of Supervisors, so I guess, had a general question about where those funds were reallocated.
Which projects in particular?
I know that there was a downtown garbage receptacle
Right.
project,
Right.
so I
There's a
think
lot-
there was 25,000 allocated
Yeah,
to
there was a
that.
lot of discussion about doing a garbage receptacle, and I think I have to go back and look. I know we had a lot of conversation, if not certainly at this level as well as the board, and I think we're not dropping from the discussion, working with Public Works and the city manager's office and the downtown businesses, trying to find a solution for garbage collection. And the issue we're talking about is the downtown properties are pretty much no extra property. There's the building, it sits on the property, takes up the whole property. So garbage cans have to be wheeled out. They don't have garbage containers on site. So possibility is finding a joint location. We're still pursuing those alternatives. And another thing actually that reminded me to mention in my presentation here is that also in terms of the undesignated, not all of the funds that we have available in this year's budget are allocated to projects, so there's still undesignated funds. This is an old number, it's about 66,000 up there now. I think that's what you had at your last meeting when you made recommendations. However, once finance gets through with all the accounting for the prior year's budget, we expect that to be pretty significantly higher, quite a bit more. So there's still funds in there if projects like that come up and come to fruition, and we find location for things, or there are other projects through the year that come up. We do plan on having undesignated funds for that.
Okay, that works. Just a follow-up question then. So if we had that 25,000 allocated for the garbage that was then taken out, did that just fall into an undesignated pot, or how is that reflected in the current numbers?
It's not removed from the current number, so I think that's still, when we get to November, on the list of potential projects that don't necessarily have allocations. What I included in your packet and what's up there now are the things that were budgeted and the things that have been allocated funding into future years, but not necessarily all those things that we've discussed or may discuss in the future. So I'll make sure based on this that that's on the list for discussion as we move forward this year.
That sounds good. Was there any other line item that the RAC had discussed or allocated funds for that wasn't
I don't believe so.
approved?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, there was.
Yeah. What was it?
I added another 25,000 at this level for downtown cleanup, and that was also taken out.
There was discussion for maintenance, downtown
Yeah,
cleanup.
and that was
maintenance.
also
Yep.
taken out.
Thank you.
And let's be honest about it, there was politically speaking, there was a reaction against downtown because of businesses that aren't in that same corridor who thought, why is the city taking care of the downtown and not the ones that are just out of the downtown or around the rest of town, et cetera. So that was part of it, and that discussion was fairly full at the board level, supervisors. So I assume that 25,000 that we had put in at my request went to the same undesignated.
Yeah, anything that was unallocated, again, went into the undesignated category that can be allocated, and that number will be revised soon.
Any other questions? So if we're not going to have an action on that, Then I move that we go to 4E for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding creation of an application for capital improvement in public infrastructure projects.
Okay, thanks, Dan. What I've included in your packet is a draft application. We had an item on your last agenda, and I got some direction of the things that, to be included in a application. So the idea of this application, like other things, we've fairly recently just had redevelopment funds that have started to come available to use for a little bit bigger projects than we had in years past. So we've had, Public Works, a lot of city projects coming forward and requesting funds. In an ad hoc basis, we were doing that really on an ad hoc basis and bringing them forward. And you rightly pointed out that maybe you need some more information in an application like other types of requests for funding and grants and things. So I've drafted an application. It's incorporated the concepts and the information that I think you requested and at the last meeting and through prior meetings. I'd be happy to go through it in detail or discuss generally with you, just kind of walking through it. I think some of the key things, just trying to make it easy so you see how much funding is requested, how much the total project budget is, what other funding sources the money will be coming from, which is also very important to the Board of Supervisors, I know, as they look at these projects. Expected start and completion date, think so that you can allocate funds appropriately in the appropriate years, so that it leaves available, if it's in future years, it leaves funds available for other projects. And explaining, again, per the redevelopment standards, why redevelopment funds are needed to complete the project, and looking specifically at a couple things. There's the policies and procedures for redevelopment that we've asked them to identify how it encourages the creation of new businesses, creates jobs, increases local revenues, et cetera, other things that are in those policies. And in addition, specifically identifying if they're in plan area 1 or 2, what objectives per those plan areas are they reaching with these projects. So I hope that kind of provides the information that you wanted and will provide for some consistent applications coming in for you to review going forward. But that's an overview. Be happy to go into more detail or answer any questions you have, make modifications based on your comments.
That looks good, Lee. I seem to remember us discussing the issue of whether funds might be available through a different source outside of the RAC. Is there space on this application for the applicant to discuss that issue?
So if you have a different way, on page 2 of the application is where they need to list the different funding sources and why redevelopment funds are required. So there's not a specific question like, did you apply for grants or other things like that, like on the special event, but this is where they'll be identifying what other funding sources.
The question that I have, we have done a lot for redevelopment area 1. And so and it looks good. And so I concentrated on redevelopment area 2. Some of this is a little bit old, but one of the things that I was curious about is we did a lot with the refacing of the downtown businesses mostly. But there is nothing here that says, that I put down in my notes, assist the current businesses with facade improvements along Carson Street, sort of like what we did for the downtown, because there's a lot of older businesses. I mean, we have been talking about car dealerships and have helped the car dealerships a lot over the years, but there are other businesses that might want to take advantage of the facade improvement program, and I did not note that there.
The facade improvement program has separate adopted standards and policies. So the Redevelopment Authority Board of Supervisors has adopted policies that is a program that can be used in both areas. So it doesn't, that request wouldn't come through this application, it would come through the facade improvement application, which allows that.
So I guess to follow up on that, does the general public know, I think the answer is no, that in redevelopment area 2, that's also a possibility to have facade improvements down there?
Yeah, no, I have on my list of things to do, actually, is to do some outreach on the facade improvement program. I think the one you approved most recently was under last year's budget, so there's $50,000 available this year in this fiscal year for facade improvements, and I do want to get the word out. So I have that written out on things to do to get the word out on facade improvements, and I'll make sure I do that both downtown and along the South Carson Street corridor.
Going back to page number 2, would there be a possibility to include something below where they're requesting, or where their funding sources are coming from, to put in a portion that can discuss history on whether or not redevelopment's given them money in the past? Because we've had that come up before where they keep coming for the same amount, and the idea was to wean off of that. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, one more thing. You have in here, and I saw this came from the 1986 plan or whatever, is on redevelopment 2, assist with the development of the former Nevada National Guard Armory site. Every time I've talked to the state about that, they said they are blankety blank not selling that property ever. They don't own enough of Carson City as it is. No comment?
Oh, no, I did want to put that on there, though, and, because the list of things in redevelopment area 2 is shorter and more concise, and that's one of them, and maybe their attitude will change someday, so.
So does anyone want to make a motion since we're, okay.
Just one more question. When you're talking about assisting auto dealers with relocation from other parts of the region to South Carson Street, can you better define that? Because, I mean, I thought we were basically out of the auto dealer business kind of thing, supporting them that way. And I know there was not a lot of good feelings with the new Nissan dealer coming in, so we didn't really support them very well, and it's a brand-new dealership.
Well, yes, we did. It's a different format, but we helped them along with, I don't recall the details, maybe Lee can help me out, but we helped them.
Yeah, it was the Board of Supervisors, and it is outside, not through my office, but it was at I'm sorry, I don't know the details of what the agreement was.
Yeah, I'd have to check back. I don't recall all the details myself because I'm hiding behind my 77 years, but we did give them a break. It wasn't the same break that the other dealerships got through this. No, it wasn't that generous. Otherwise, I wouldn't have voted for it.
Yeah, I believe it was just a sales tax reimbursement agreement with performance measures. Not money up front for construction, but.
Well, which is what we do for any major retail that has been coming in, so.
We don't do that now. So that program was generally expended so it's only under the redevelopment area number 2 and the auto dealers that was done.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay, so does someone want to make a motion with, and include the couple changes that we mentioned to move forward on this?
I move to approve the proposed form with the changes presented by this board.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, Lee, any staff reports, any extra stuff you want to talk about?
Yeah, just a couple updates. On May 6th, you reviewed and approved the facade improvement grant for the Nolan Inn. So I just want an update on that. I mean, we've been in discussions with them. They still have ongoing, they bought a property in pretty bad shape inside and out. So per the facade improvement, they have 6 months or until early November to start the improvements per the policies under the facade improvement program. And we've talked to them about, they're working on it. They've in talking to Jacob Nolan, their contractor's been busy. They expect to have him available to start the work in the next month or two on the facade improvement. And so they'll do the exterior painting in conjunction with that. But that's just an update on that. Also, on the redevelopment and legislative front, this is just to make you aware, SB 465 was enacted this year, which allows the Board of Supervisors to allocate redevelopment tax increment to the school district, should they choose. I haven't heard much discussion on that. It's something that's out there, but just wanted to make you aware of that. And it would just allow the city to give them the increment that would have otherwise gone to the school district. In terms of future items, as I mentioned in November, we'll give you more detailed project updates and we'll do the budget allocation discussion again in November, but I don't have any other specific items that I expect at this time. That's all I have.
Okay. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay, I found this redevelopment plan for the Carson City Redevelopment Project 1 from February 6, 1986, very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of stuff it's been done, we're still doing it or in the process. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that the fact that the Redevelopment Authority worked with the Carson City Planning Commission. We did have a joint meeting with the Historical Commission. Is this something that might be of value for us to do, is to sit down with the Planning Commission for, discussing our two separate areas instead of learning about it in the newspaper? That's the only thing that I thought might be a future agenda item or a possibility.
So the Planning Commission, in adopting a redevelopment plan and probably in amending it, the Planning Commission has some involvement. They have to make some determination, if I remember the process correctly. So that's why they would be involved. I'll talk to you about that issue and see if, can't really think offhand how to frame that joint meeting, but if we could talk about it, we'll come up with something.
There's so much going on in redevelopment area too, so, I mean, this might make sense to do something at this time.
I guess I have one question on that too. Since this was back in 1986, is there any appetite to update or revise the list?
I know, I'm trying to, that question's come up before. I'm trying to remember where we left it. I think Commissioner Hanneman asked about that before too, right?
I know I brought this up before. I mean, we're not going to reconstruct the roundhouse. We know that.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
gone.
I mean, we could go, there's a process to go through to amend it. You know what, maybe that's what I'll do that's another item I could put on the agenda for November is to lay out the process for amending a redevelopment area. I can add that to the agenda.
So are you still, Ronnie, looking towards the north now? You've mentioned that before.
I don't know, it's up to you. I think the north is probably the worst. I mean, that's still an entryway into Carson City. It's a gateway into Carson City. once the south end has been redeveloped, maybe we can take the downtown out of redevelopment, although there's still a lot to do, and look at the north end. I mean, that sorely needs it, so that's, but I'm not saying that it should be in addition to, because then the whole Carson Street is in redevelopment. It should be taking one out and using the funds for another. So, I mean, that is a problem that a lot of people talk about all the time is North Carson Street looks so bad. So that's just that's just a suggestion.
And if I may, I would like to concur with Commissioner Hanneman on that, because in looking at page 6 and 7, and I guess if any redevelopment authority committee issue would keep me from going to sleep at night, and there's not many things that would keep me from going to sleep. I would have to say it would be the lack of not really looking at the northern part of the city. As I look at page 6 and 7 and mention, for example, number 8, the plan was adopted in 2004. Well, we're like 15 years way overdue. And I guess what I'm speaking of particularly is that vacant Kmart lot. Well, all those vacant buildings look like a ghost town over there. And yet we focus on downtown, which is okay, but downtown should not be the aorta of any city. We can't neglect one section and just concentrate and put all the dollars and the necessary improvements into one particular area. So I would like us in the future to have some discussions, Lee, about that. What can we do to go back and revisit some of the items in projected Area 2 that was adopted back in 2004, particularly on the northern Carson Street area, because there has to be some incentives that we can do to get those vacants back running in occupancy and see that area to thrive. Because, you know, when you, like Ronnie said, you coming in from Reno and other places, you're going to get to the north before you get to downtown and the south. So I just think we need to have further discussions about that as we look for our future agendas to come.
Just since you noted the Kmart property, I will note that that property is actually in redevelopment area number 2. It's a non-contiguous piece. And it was put into redevelopment just because of those issues that you noted, although it hasn't been used for anything that's happened on that property.
And that's my question. It hadn't been used for anything. So can we revisit that again? Because I think it's worth to resuscitate some life back in that conversation.
Yeah, to give you a little history on that too is kind of the power center used to be North Carson until the freeway came down through, at least got to Fairview. And the south was actually, looked a lot like the north looks now and was really neglected. Now it's all shifted because of the traffic patterns and the flow, because before that, you had to come through, it was the first thing you hit when you got to Carson. Now you're hopping however far down you need to come around. So I think it's important to go back and look at that now, because just due to the traffic alone, the power center is shifted to all, the shopping center across from me used to be mostly vacant, now it's, full. So that's part of the history.
We might want to get the owners, and I'm in contact with them, of that facility here to explain what has been happening. Because the years have gone by and there's 2 owners. The property is owned by one entity out of Texas, or was owned. And the other is owned by a gentleman out of Reno who has been trying to redevelop that, but because the land is owned by somebody else, it's really cumbersome to do. So if you want him here next time, I can contact him and have him come and explain and see what they're doing.
They also want premium dollars they want far too much money for what the space is worth.
And then the other thing that's happening too is, all of you know that Bodine's wanted to move to North Carson, and that would have revitalized that area, especially the one side. However, there were political issues, parking issues, et cetera, that were not, and you know more about that than I do. You were one of them. Cost you a lot. Why don't you explain that one?
Well, yeah, it's a long story, but it was licensing issues and hotel room issues, and it was kind of a mess in the whole city. And in part of that, it was also that they were asking too much money. They couldn't even come to a deal on the rent either, so. Okay, well, we had the future agenda items, and we've had RAC reports, it sounds like. So does anybody have anything else?
Tomorrow night is National Night Out.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow night's National Night Out, if anybody's interested. And Friday is the release of the Art of Racing in the Rain movie at the theater.
And the Jazz Festival starts this weekend.
And Jazz Festival. So a lot of stuff going on. The 9th. Okay, one last shot at public comment. Okay, without that, motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, meeting adjourned.